Okay, so yeah, this is another deep dive breakdown, which I haven't actually done for a while. I think the last one I did was on was it CONMEBOL? Yeah. But yeah, today's on has to do with CAF. So yeah, let's just get into it. Sorry. Um yeah, so the Confederation of African Football is effectively one of the oldest confederations, not just in FIFA but in football in general. Obviously CAF is FIFA affiliated with a total of 56 recognized members. Um, actually 54 recognized members, and then 56 with just two members being unofficial members. And yeah, CAF was actually established on the 8th of February 1957. So the anniversary just was a few days ago in terms of the celebration of this particular confederation. Um, and obviously Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, and South Africa were the founding members of CAF um, during its initial formation stages, which actually took place in Portugal. So what happened was that the four nations, Egypt, Sudan, South Africa, and Ethiopia, met the year before the official founding of CAF. So they met in 1956, and that's when they had the initial talks about forming a confederation for African football in Portugal. Obviously, the first official president of CAF was a guy by the name of Abdel Aziz Abdallah Salem of Egypt. And can I just point out, Egypt actually, out of the four founding nations, Egypt is the most successful in terms of the Africans. I think they have about seven African trophies from different African competitions over the years. So yeah, officially CAF was founded on the of February 1957, despite the fact that there were initial talks made previous year in 1956. Now, officially, the headquarters of CAF sits currently in Egypt, but the first General Assembly took place in Sudan. So yeah, since 2002, the headquarters of CAF sits in Cairo, uh, in Egypt, with the two unofficial members being Zanzibar and Reunion, who make up the total 56 members, in addition to the recognized members of the 54 member state associations. Yeah, and obviously, when you look at African football in general, under the umbrella of CAF, you have six zonal regions. So not a lot of people actually know this, but obviously on the African map, you have yeah, you have the northern countries. So you have your Egypt's, your Algeria's, your Morocco, your Tunisia's, your Libya's, and they form the Union of North African Football. So basically, the North African Arab nations, especially those ones, have their own um, subsidiary confederation under CAF. And then when you come to the West African countries, because oh, generally because like West Africa is quite big, they had to split it up into two. So you have the western side of West Africa, and then you have the eastern side of West Africa in terms of football. But both form under one subsidiary confederation. So you have the West African Union, West African Football Union Zone, or the WAFU, which comprises of Cape Verde or Cape Verde, Gambia, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mali, Mauritania, Senegal, and Sierra, Sierra, Sierra Leone. Um, yeah, and on the eastern side of the West African um, football map, you have the well-known nations of Benin, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Niger, Nigeria, Togo. Um, yeah, the heavyweights. And on the central side of the map, you have the countries of Chad, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Congo, Gabon, and DRC, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo. So that's the Central African Federation Union. On the eastern side of the map, you have the Council for East and Central African Football Associations. Again, some Central African football nations had to be grouped with the eastern side. Then you have your countries like your Eritreas, your Djibouti's, your Somalias, your Sudan, which obviously now has South Sudan and Sudan itself. Your Kenyas, your Ugandas, your Rwandas, your Burundis, your Tanzanias, your Seychelles, and obviously, yeah, your unrecognized ones such as your Zanzibars also fall within this category. Then, lastly, you have the Southern nations, which form under the subsidiary of the Council of Southern African Football Associations. So this is where you have your countries like your South Africas, your Angolas, your Botswanas, your Comoroses, your Lesothos, your Madagascars, your Malawis, your Mauritiuses, your Mozambiques, Namibia. We don't know why it says shows is here. Should be on the s- eastern central part. Anyway, your Swatinis, your Zambias, and your Zimbabwe's in this one. So yeah, that's the map of the different subsidiary confederations under CAF football. Again, not a lot of people actually know this about African football and in terms of the governance of African football. So it is quite useful to look into stuff like this. Again, CAF represents national football across the different African associations. So you've got your continental competitions, um, for the national sides and also for the club sides. So for the national sides, you have obviously Crown Jewel itself, which is the African Cup of Nations, which is played for both the men's side and for the women's side, and also um, the Africans have the U20s and the U23s and the U17 editions as well. And obviously for the club side of the game, you have the CAF Champions League, which is basically um, a replica of the UEFA Champions League for African football. Again, um, the club side of the Champions League also has its women's side and its men's side as well. So yeah, this is just a general flow chart of the national competitions and the club competitions under CAF. Again, you have the CAF Confederation Cup, which is played as a form of or as a version of the club competition, which is quite similar to UEFA's Europa League. And obviously, you have the CAF Super Cup, which pits the Champions League winners from CAF against the Confederation Cup winners. And then you also have the African Football League, which is sort of like Super League created by CAF, which essentially um, clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona actually try to create one for Europe in the form of the European Super League when that one failed. Um, yeah. On the national side, I just mentioned the AFCONs, but then there's also the African Nations Championship. So for those who don't know what that is, essentially it is the localized version of the AFCONs. So the African Nations Championship was actually created to cater for domestic talents within African clubs. So the general rule for this is that only players who play in domestic um, club teams within the African continent can actually compete for the national teams in this competition, which is the African Nations Championship. Then obviously you've got the futsal African Cup of Nations, which is basically the futsal version of the Africans. And you've got the beach soccer Africa Cup of Nations, which is also the beach soccer version of the Africans as well. Yeah. In terms of future direction for CAF, currently what's been put in place or what's been implemented has to do with the African schools competition program, where basically it's a continental wide tournament which pits different African schools um within the competition to determine which is the best. And through that, you have scouts from different academies and different clubs finding new talents, raw grassroots talents, pick from and obviously develop. You also got the Women's Champions League as well, which promotes equality within the women's game. Yeah. Um, Currently, the CAF president is Patrice Motsepe, who's the seventh to occupy the position. So there have been seven CAF presidents in total since the first one, who I mentioned previously before. Um, so yeah, Motsepe, uh, current president of CAF, he's also one of the current vice presidents for FIFA, and currently he's also the cousin to the South African president, which raises some questions in regards to conflict of interest, especially given the fact that Motsepe also is the owner of a South African football club. Again, it raises questions of conflict of interest here. In terms of the African Cup of Nations and the winners and the host nations, so the first AFCON was obviously hosted in 1957, just after or just before the founding of CAF. So Sudan was the host nation, and obviously Egypt won that one. Then 2 years later, you had the AFCON in 1959, which ironically enough was hosted by the UAE. Um, I believe that's the UAE, which was strange. But yeah, Egypt actually went on to win that one as well. Then in 1962, you had Ethiopia hosting it, and Ethiopia actually was the first to win an AFCON on home soil back in 62. In 63, Ghana, and as host nations, Ghana won that one too. And then 2 years later, in 65, Tunisia hosted it, and then Ghana was the first country actually from Africa to win two back-to-back AFCONs. In 68, Ethiopia hosted, and it was won by DR Congo. Um, then back then there was Zaire. Then you have the AFCON in 1970, which was hosted by Sudan, and then Sudan won that one. AFCON 1972 was hosted by Cameroon. Congo were the winners of that one. In 74, Egypt were the host nation. DR Congo, again, became the second team after Egypt and Ghana to win a second AFCON by then. In 76, Ethiopia hosted it. Morocco won that one. In 78, Ghana again hosted it and won on home soil again. In 1980, AFCON, Nigeria hosted it and they finally won that one on home soil. In AFCON 1982, Libya hosted it and then Ghana won that one. In AFCON 1984, Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire to some people hosted it and Cameroon won the first AFCON there. In 1986, Egypt hosted it, and just like Ghana and Nigeria before them, they won it on home soil. In 88, you had Morocco hosting it and Cameroon winning the second AFCON. In 1990, Algeria hosted it, and Algeria won again on home soil. So just like CONMEBOL, and yeah, to some extent, just like CONMEBOL, the home advantage actually plays a significant role in football, where most teams that usually host on home soil actually go on to sometimes, you could argue, about 50-50. 5 times out of 10, they go on to win it on home soil. Um, yeah, in 92, Senegal hosted it, and then Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, won their first AFCON on that one. In 94, Tunisia, Nigeria, with their golden generation of players like Amokachi and Diego Kocha and Amonike and yeah, those guys. They went on to win that one in 94. In 96, South Africa hosted it. Again, we see the home advantage being played out here, with South Africa winning it on home soil. In 98, Burkina Faso hosted it on home soil, but then Egypt won that one. In 2000, and this was the first instance where the AFCON was hosted on two in multiple nations. Yeah, both Ghana and Nigeria hosted the AFCON as joint hosts, but Cameroon were the ones to win it. In 2002, Mali hosted it, and obviously Cameroon, just like Egypt, just like Ghana before them, just like DR Congo before them, went on to win back-to-back AFCONs. In 2004, Tunisia hosted it on home soil, and the Tunisians delivered by winning on home soil again in 2004. In 2006, Egypt hosted it again, home advantage. Egypt won again. In 2008, Ghana hosted this one, and this time Egypt won back to back. In 2010, Angola hosted it, and Egypt were, for the first time ever, the only African nation to win 3 back to back AFCON competitions. In 2012, you have Gabon and Equatorial Guinea hosting, and Zambia winning the first one in 2012. In 2013, which, funny enough, right after the 2012 AFCON, I think the rules decide, like, well, essentially, CAF decided to change the rules where the hosting dates had to change. So right after the 2012 AFCON, you had the 2013 AFCON, where South Africa played hosts and Nigeria won that one. This time with the likes of players like John Obi Mikel, and obviously they had their manager, I think it's Stephen Keshi. Yeah. In 2015, you have Equatorial Guinea hosting, and Ivory Coast winning that one. The likes of players like Yaya Toure, Kolo Toure in their squad for that one. In 2017, Gabon hosted it, and Cameroon won that one. In 2019, Egypt hosted, and you had Algeria winning that one with the likes of players like Riyad Mahrez in the squad. Then obviously you had the AFCON in 2011, in 2021, sorry, which obviously due to the COVID pandemic had to be played in 2022 instead. And Cameroon were the hosts for that one. And obviously, Senegal were the winners with the likes of players like Sadio Mane in the squad, leading them. In 2023, that's the AFCON 2023, um, you had Ivory Coast hosting, and obviously Ivory Coast winning on home soil. And yeah, Cote d'Ivoire um, got the third title for that one. And yeah, currently in the AFCON, which just ended, just well, which started in 2025 but ended in 2026, Morocco were the hosts, and obviously there has been a lot of controversies regarding them in terms of what took place in this AFCON. Now, although this says pending, we know Senegal won the AFCON on that one, and they are the current winners of the AFCONs and the current title holders here. So the next AFCON is due to take place in 2027, and for the first time ever, we are likely to see three host nations in the form of Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. So the AFCON is going towards the eastern part of the continent. Yeah, we wait to see who wins that one. Yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, just drop a comment down below who you think might actually win the 2027 AFCON. Okay, so in terms of the list of countries that have won the AFCONs and how many times they managed to win it, obviously Egypt are the most successful African nation at the AFCON. They have 7-time AFCON champions, having won in 1957, 59, 86, 98, 06, 08, and 2010. Then in second place, you have Cameroon, being 5-time AFCON champions, and they won it in 84, 88, 2000, 02, and 2017. In third place, you have Ghana, being 4-time champions. Black Stars, sadly, have come close to winning it on several occasions since their last attempt in 82. I think in 08 they reached the semi-finals, and then in 2015 they reached the finals where they lost in penalty shootouts to Cote d'Ivoire. So yeah, Ghana comes in fourth place, having won it in 63, 65, 78, and 82. Nigeria comes in third place, and not just them. Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire actually are on the same level here in terms of being 3-time African champions. So Nigeria have won it in 1980, in 94, and 2013. And Cote d'Ivoire have won it in 92, 2020, 2015, 2023, which was their most recent win. Then obviously, you have the Congo in sixth place, being 2-time champions. Alongside them, and Senegal should be in this list now. Yeah. So yeah, we have Congo and Algeria and Senegal should be on this list as joint 2-time champions. Um, obviously, DR Congo won it back in 1968, 1974, and Algeria won it in 1990 and 2019. And if I had to update this, Senegal obviously are now 2-time champions, having won it in 2021 and now in 2025 or 26. And yeah, Sudan, Congo, Ethiopia have just won it once in their respective football histories. Morocco, yeah, have also won it once. South Africa have also won it once. Tunisia once. Zambia once. Yeah, so like I said before, this should be updated. So Senegal actually have won it twice now. As of the time of making this deep dive breakdown video. Um, yeah. So in terms of landmark stadiums on the CAF's Confederacy, I think the most iconic one has to be Soccer City, which most people who remember the 2010 World Cup would remember the stadium. This is where obviously a lot of history was made in terms of matches such as Spain versus the Netherlands. Obviously, Iniesta scoring that late winning goal to give Spain the first ever World Cup. Yeah, the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony of the Africans as well. Sorry, of the World Cup as well, with Shakira and yeah, those guys, and also other matches as well. I think the match with Ghana Uruguay also took place there in Soccer City. Yeah. So in this list of landmark stadiums, you will see a lot of South African stadiums here. So there's the one in Durban, which also played a part in the 2010 World Cup. You have the Nelson Mandela Stadium in Eastern Cape. Then in Cote d'Ivoire, you have the Alassane Ouattara Stadium, which um hosted the matches for the 2023 AFCON. In Nigeria, you have the Abiola Stadium in Ogun State. And then you have the new administrative capital stadium in Cairo, Egypt. You've also got the Rwanda Stadium, which is quite new. It's in Kigali. You've got the Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Pretoria, again, South Africa. And the Cape Town Stadium in Cape Town, South Africa, which also hosted some games during the 2010 World Cup. Um, Again, South Africa. Uh, I'm actually botched this. I think it's in Pumalanga. Yeah. Then in Morocco, you have the Stade Mohammed V Stadium in Casablanca. And yeah. So in terms of football legends that have actually come out of CAF and Africa in general, you have the likes of George Weah, who till this day remains the only African player to win Ballon d'Or. Obviously Roger Miller from the 1990 World Cup. Um, you have Kanu from Nigeria. JJ Okocha, we all know who he is. Or most football fans know who he is. Abedi Pele, Drogba, Didier Drogba. Chelsea fans will know him, and football fans in general. Samuel Eto'o, obviously. Michael Essien, Yaya Toure, John Obi Mikel, who I mentioned earlier on, Emmanuel Debayo, Solomon Kalou, Polo Toure, Asamoah Gyan, Sadio Mane, Riyad Mahrez, Sami Kufur, Mohamed Salah. These are just the names of examples of legends that have come out of African football and who have actually contributed massively to global football in general. In terms of managers that have actually come out of CAF, like in terms of managers that have come out of Africa in general, you have the likes of Aliou Cisse, who obviously was the head coach of Senegal. Stephen Keshe, who I mentioned before, he won Nigeria the second AFCON, sorry, the third AFCON back in 2013. Charles Jemfi, who won Ghana the first two AFCONs back in the 50s and 60s. Walid from Morocco. Uh, Osimane from South Africa, and then Clive Barker from South Africa. So yeah, these are just examples of managers and head coaches to come out of African football and to come out of the Confederation of African Football in general. So yeah, when considering everything, and when considering the future of CAF and the strength of CAF as a confederation in football compared to the other football confederations under FIFA, in terms of football history and international accolades, so in terms of like the achievements of the different football associations under CAF and also the football nations to represent CAF at the World Cup, I gave them a 1, so they get 1 point for that. Because given the fact that countries like Ghana, Cameroon, Nigeria, Morocco, and yeah, I think these 4 nations, which are actually, and Senegal, 5 nations, sorry, these 5 nations have actually proved to put up monumental performances at the World Cup and have actually created some lasting memories for people who watch the FIFA World Cup. In terms of world class players, managers, and legends produced, they get half a point, so that's a 0.5 point. Again, yes, Africa as a whole, as a continent, has managed to produce world class players, but again, it just points back to the fact that we only have, or we can only see, one Ballon d'Or winner come out of Africa so far. And yes, there is politics to be spoken about here in terms of like why there isn't enough Ballon d'Or winners coming out of Africa. Um, yeah, so world class players, I had to give them 5 for that one. In terms of managers, there hasn't really been a lot of world class managers to come out of Africa yet, who you can see coach world class teams in Europe and other places as well. So that also comes at a disadvantage. And yes, in terms of legends, we have produced legends, but we've not produced World Cup winning legends yet. So in terms of legends who have won the AFCONs, yes. In terms of legends who have gone on to win UEFA Champions League trophies, yes. League trophies in different countries like England and Spain and Italy, yes, we have. But yeah, it's just the World Cup that we do not have any legends to look up to. But we have a long list of legends when we look at African football in general. League structure, club structure, stadium structure. I'll be honest. There's only a handful of countries that you could point to who do have some form of like proper league structure and stadium infrastructure that you could say reaches a world class standard in terms of African football. And I'm looking at countries like South Africa and obviously the northern African countries like your Egypt's, your Morocco's, and your um, Tunisia's, Algeria's. Yeah, those nations. So yeah, they get half a point for that. And I do feel like CAF as a confederation should actually do more in terms of like giving more infrastructure and to also try and tackle corruption in terms of that area because sometimes money actually does or finances actually goes into trying to get the best infrastructure and best league structure for different football associations connected to CAF. But then you have the issue again where politics has a role to play, where countries don't actually use the resources given to them to raise the standards of infrastructure. In terms of what football fame and reputation, yes, most African countries have established themselves on the world stage. But then again, it's just a handful. Like I said before, it's just countries like your Nigerias, your Cameroons, your Senegals, your Egypts, your Moroccos, your Ghanas. And yeah, no, it's just about 6 or 7 countries that have actually made an impact. So yeah, half a point as well. In terms of plans and aspirations for future development in the football world, yes. In terms of women's football, CAF seems to actually be making some efforts to promote that in terms of equality. But in terms of other areas too, like you would expect more to be done for youth football. Um, which I'm not saying it's not being done, but like it needs to reach the levels of a CONMEBOL and UEFA to really compete with those two other heavyweight confederations. So yeah, in total, that gives them a score of 3 stars, which is not too bad. So yeah, CAF is a mid football confederation. Yeah, these are the sources which went into making this. So yeah, these are just my views or takes on this. Obviously, some people might disagree on this deep dive breakdown, but yeah, this is just my take on where African football and where the governing body of African football is right now in terms of what they can do and what they can improve on. And hopefully, yeah, I mean, it's not in a whole have could do more to try and get other countries and also get the more established African nations to step up the game. And I feel with the right direction, we could see that happening very soon. We could eventually see an African country very soon actually winning World Cup.